Her breath trembled in the cold air of Tehran, but her face didn't flinch. A single heartbeat thudded in her chest loud enough, she thought, to expose her. But still, she walked. No one around her could guess what this woman had done or what she was about to do. Not the guards watching from the rooftop, not the translator beside her, not even the two women from the Guardians of the Revolution who flanked her, their expressions blank, their steps synchronized. They thought they were escorting a loyal follower. They had no idea that the most dangerous traitor Iran had ever seen was hidden beneath the folds of that black chador. Her name was Catherine Shakdam. And today, she would enter the room where only a handful had ever been invited. Today, she would look upon the face of the man some considered the deputy of the awaited Mahdi, the supreme leader of Iran. Today, her mission would come full circle. But to understand how a woman from a Jewish Holocaust survivor family reached the very heart of the Islamic Revolution, we have to go back, not 10 days, not 10 months, but 10 years to a London campus where East met West in the soft buzz of academic lectures and borrowed glances. That's where Catherine's first domino fell. A Yemeni Muslim student, polite, soft-spoken, intensely spiritual. He wasn't like the others who partied and drank after class. He fasted Mondays and Thursdays. He talked about justice and suffering, not ambition or greed. Catherine, curious, brilliant, and unusually observant, was drawn in. She didn't fall in love, not yet. What she fell into was something deeper, a mystery she wanted to solve. She married him in 2004, a Jewish woman with a family lineage soaked in Zionism and post-war survival, now suddenly sharing meals with a Muslim who began every sentence with Inshallah. It wasn't love that shocked her parents, it was ideology. Her father, a secular Jew, didn't scream. He simply stopped speaking to her for a while. Her grandfather, a Holocaust survivor, said nothing, but his silence became a wall that never crumbled. Then one night, she walked into her husband's prayer room, a soft green prayer mat, a string of black tasbih beads, a tiny book of du'as. She watched him pray for peace for Yemen, for Palestine, even for Israel. Something in her cracked. She accepted Islam quietly, first Sunni the way her husband understood it, but it didn't stop there. Catherine didn't just adopt beliefs, she dissected them. She read, questioned, debated, documented, and somewhere in that obsession, her innocence began to peel away. Because for Catherine, Islam wasn't a faith, it was a door that opened to many rooms, and behind one of those doors, someone whispered, "You want the truth? Walk deeper." Her marriage began to crumble, not from arguments or infidelity but from something far more dangerous, purpose. She was becoming a different person, not a wife, not a mother, not even a student of Islam, but something else, something sharper, something colder. When the divorce papers were signed in 2014, Catherine had already disappeared in her mind. The Catherine who walked away from that marriage wasn't heartbroken. She was free, and within a year, she reappeared, but this time in Tehran, in black hijab, fluent in Islamic philosophy, quoting Khamenei, writing essays about wilayat-e-faqih. She had already changed her sect, from Sunni to Shia, from curious convert to ideological soldier, or so it seemed. Iran didn't just accept her, it celebrated her. Mashrig News, Tasnim, Mer News, Press TV. She wrote for all of them and more. At first, she signed off as Catherine, then it became Catherine Shakdam, then K. Shakdam, until her name, once whispered with suspicion in London, was now spoken with admiration and calm. And her articles? They weren't just words, they were keys, praising the Islamic Revolution, defending Hezbollah, exposing the hypocrisy of Western imperialism. Each sentence was a blade, carving trust out of doubt. She wasn't just accepted, she was lifted. She became a regular contributor to Khamenei.r, the official website of the supreme leader himself. Her pen bled devotion, her tongue spoke of sacrifice, her mind played the long game. But Catherine wasn't writing for the revolution, she was writing a script, her own, because beneath the black abaya and soft-spoken lectures was a woman who had once studied psychology, finance, communication. She understood manipulation. She knew how to echo back exactly what people wanted to hear. She wasn't just in Tehran to write. She was there to listen, to enter the rooms no one else could enter, to be in the presence of commanders, philosophers, ministers, and slowly, to make them trust her. But it wasn't enough. To reach the core, she needed something more intimate, more powerful. She needed love, or at least, the illusion of it. And so began the second phase of her operation, one temporary marriage at a time. Mut'ah. To the outside world, it was legal. To insiders, it was sacred. To Catherine, it was access. She wore their rings, learned their secrets, listened to their whispers in the safety of bedroom shadows. And everything, they said, every map, every name, every location was catalogued. But where was it going? That's the question that would haunt Iran later. But in these early days, no one suspected her. Because how could they? She had cried at Karbala. She had fasted Ashura. She had written books like Walking with the Holy Household of the Prophet and Under the Banner of the First Imam. Even General Qasem Soleimani had smiled in her presence. She was pictured with his daughter, with pro-revolution filmmakers, with scholars, with ministers. She had become what they called in Tehran, a mother of the resistance. But behind her eyes was Mossad. They say a woman can make a man forget his mission, but Catherine Shakdam, she made entire regimes forget their suspicions. By 2016, she had built an empire of relationships inside Iran without raising a single red flag. Her voice was soft, her words religious, her intentions pure on the surface. She didn't seduce with her body alone. She seduced with ideology, poetry, intellect, and pain. Catherine understood grief. She used it like a scalpel. When she spoke to commanders who had lost brothers in Syria, she mourned with them. When she sat with clerics who had been imprisoned under the Shah, she recited the stories of Karbala as if they were her own childhood memories. She made them believe she didn't just support the revolution, she bled for it. And so, one by one, the gates opened. She was invited to religious circles, think tanks, closed-door conferences, meetings where maps were laid bare and names were whispered, names that weren't supposed to exist. Every room she entered gave her one more thread in the tapestry of Iran's nuclear, political, and military structure. But she wasn't just taking, she was giving. And that was the genius. She brought stories from the West. She whispered how the world admired Iran's resilience, how her articles in French and English were changing the narrative, how even non-Muslims were now quoting Wilayat Faqih after reading her. They called her a bridge between the Islamic world and the West. But what they didn't know was that Catherine had built that bridge with explosives under every plank. Because while she sat beside them at Shia conferences, sipping tea and nodding at their speeches, her mind was ticking like a machine. Who sat where? Who spoke first? Who got nervous when nuclear sites were mentioned? And most importantly, who trusted her enough to confess what they weren't supposed to? By late 2016, she had become more than a journalist. She was now a confidant to the confidants. It was around this time that Mossad's system began receiving precise data, coordinates of research sites hidden in Mashhad, timetables of clerical convoys traveling to Qom, blueprints of a harmless medical building that doubled as a data server for the nuclear program. No cyber breach, no satellite trick, just one woman, with a notebook, and a terrifying gift, the ability to make powerful men talk like schoolboys. They called her al-Muqawama, mother of resistance, but they never asked where she came from, why her accent still had traces of Europe, why she never had real family in Iran, why she never cried in public, except when cameras were watching. Because in revolutions, people don't question those who cry for your cause. Then came her books. Arabia's Rising was a masterpiece of psychological infiltration. Disguised as religious awakening, it was actually a diagnostic manual identifying ideological weaknesses inside the Iranian clergy. From Mecca to Karbala was laced with symbolism, targeting emotional triggers that kept the religious elite loyal and distracted. The books went viral in the Shia world, reviewed by Ayatollahs, quoted in Friday sermons, even referenced during military briefings. Because when you believe someone loves your God as much as you do, you stop protecting your secrets. And yet, Catherine always knew this dream would end. Because in the end, she wasn't dreaming, she was hunting. But for what? For information? For revenge? For validation? No one really knew. Because even Catherine wasn't fully sure anymore. Sometimes she would stare at herself in the hotel mirror fully veiled, makeup barely visible, eyes trained to look submissive, and she would ask herself, am I still pretending? Or has the role become who I am? It was a dangerous question, but even more dangerous was how good she had become at answering it with lies. Because even when she felt doubt, even when she wondered if this mission was eating her soul alive, one thing kept her steady, the bigger goal. to reach the supreme leader, to stand in front of the one man even Mossad had never touched, to look into the eyes of Iran's most protected secret, not to kill him, but to understand him, because in her mind, that's where the true power lived, not in missiles, not in uranium, not even in war plans. The power was in belief, and if she could understand how one man made 80 million people believe, she could destroy the entire system from the inside, not with a gun, but with an idea. But to do that, she had to do something no one else had ever done. She had to win the invitation. You don't request a meeting with Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. You earn it. You wait. You perform. You sacrifice. And in February 2017, after years of performance, sacrifice, and perfectly placed propaganda, the invitation came. February 2017, rain whispered on the rooftops of Tehran, soft like secrets passed between shadows. Catherine stood by the window of her hotel suite, her face pale, her hands trembling beneath her black gloves. This wasn't like the other missions, not like the dozens of meetings, the staged interviews, the temporary marriages, or the coded emails. This was different. This time, she wasn't chasing whispers. She was stepping into the source of them. Outside, 3 cars with black windows waited. No plates, no symbols, just quiet menace the way power always travels in this part of the world. 2 women from the Guardians of the Revolution entered her room, silent as stone. They nodded once, no greetings, just duty. Catherine adjusted her hijab. Her fingers quivered as she tightened the ring on her finger, a cheap silver band, symbolic but meaningless. She knew the protocol: no perfume, no eye contact, no sudden movements, and under no circumstances was she allowed to speak unless spoken to. As she stepped into the car, Tehran faded behind tinted glass. Every building passed was a memory. Every alley she saw once held a secret. And now, she was leaving it all behind, to enter a place even she could not fully calculate. The car moved like a ghost through the city. No sound, no horns, no GPS. She wasn't sure if they were still in Tehran or on the outskirts when the car finally turned into a narrow path lined with olive trees. A gate opened, then another, then silence. They stepped out into a courtyard surrounded by tall, simple walls. No cameras in sight, no guards. But Catherine knew she was being watched. An old man in clerical robes walked ahead, never looking back. The women followed. So did she. The house wasn't a palace. It was shockingly plain. Worn Persian rugs, cushions on the floor, low wooden tables. And in the corner, a photograph of Ayatollah Khomeini, grim, eternal, unblinking. She was offered sweet tea with saffron. She took it with both hands as instructed. Didn't sip, just held it. She looked around, memorizing everything. The exits, the ceiling fans, the uneven crack in the corner of the tile wall. Her mind catalogued every detail, even as her heart pounded like a drum inside a coffin. And then a murmur in the hallway, the shuffle of slow, deliberate footsteps. She didn't look, but she knew he was here. The women stood up. So did she, eyes down, chin tucked. Fear wrapped around her like a second hijab. A translator whispered behind her ear, "You may be seated. He has entered." Catherine lowered herself to the carpet, careful not to let her hands shake visibly. Across from her, seated in a simple wooden chair, was the man who had haunted global intelligence circles for decades. The man who had outlived sanctions, wars, cyber attacks, assassinations, and uprisings. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Even in silence, his presence was crushing, not because of his power but because of how little he used it. He didn't yell, he didn't lecture, he simply observed. And Catherine felt as if her very soul was being peeled open under that gaze. She dared not look up, but she could feel it, like a sun she wasn't allowed to face. Then, finally, he spoke. "She is the writer," the translator said. "She has written of the revolution as one of us." Silence again. Then the supreme leader asked something else. The translator hesitated. "He asks why you write with such passion, even more than some born into this faith." Catherine smiled softly, not with arrogance, but with crafted humility. "Because I search for something to believe in," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And your words gave me a reason." The translator relayed it. Khamenei didn't blink. He merely nodded. Then, in a voice Catherine will never forget, the leader said, "There will come a war, not for oil, not for land, but for belief." Catherine froze. She wasn't sure if it was prophecy or threat. He leaned forward slightly. You will see things. You will feel betrayed by both sides. But the one who holds on to truth survives. She nodded slowly, pretending to understand, but her thoughts were racing. Was he suspecting her, testing her, or warning her? Then suddenly, without further words, he stood. Catherine immediately dropped her eyes. The translator whispered, "He is leaving." And just like that, the meeting was over. But something lingered in the room. A silence that felt heavier than presence. Like Khamenei had left something behind, or taken something with him. Catherine sat frozen. The other women said nothing. Then one gently tapped her shoulder. "You will be escorted back now." The walk back to the car felt like a funeral march. Not of a man, but of innocence. Because no matter how prepared she had been, no matter how much data she had memorized, coded, and smuggled, nothing had prepared her for that meeting. Not because she was intimidated, but because for the first time in years, she felt unsure. Had she just fooled the most powerful man in Iran? Or had he let her? As the car drove her away, she looked out at the city she had manipulated, infiltrated, and twisted to her will. And she asked herself, did I just win? Or did I just get marked? After her private meeting with the supreme leader, Catherine's name didn't just rise in Iran, it echoed. Not as a foreign journalist, not even as a convert, but as something far more dangerous, a symbol. From the mosques of Qom to the intelligence halls in Tehran, people whispered about the white woman who cried for Karbala. TV hosts quoted her. University professors used her writings and lectures. Clerics called her the daughter of the revolution, and her meeting with Khamenei. It wasn't officially documented, but everyone seemed to know. Iran's elite don't post photos. They send signals. And the signal was clear. Catherine was trusted. That trust became power. The kind that doesn't need titles or uniforms, just a nod, a room, a phone call. She began receiving private invitations to high-level briefings. Not political. At first religious ones. But Iran is a place where religion and power share the same bloodline. And so, slowly, Catherine slipped into spaces even Iranian-born citizens couldn't enter. One evening, inside a private compound in Mashhad, a cleric leaned toward her after a heated debate on martyrdom. He whispered, "They say your pen is mightier than 1,000 soldiers. Write something that will scare Israel." She smiled. And that night, she did. A poetic essay dripping in defiance. Published the next morning. Retweeted by ministers. Quoted on Khamenei.ir. But it was never about Israel. Not really. It was about her. The illusion. The mask. The dance. And Catherine danced better than anyone. She knew when to weep. When to rage. When to go silent. She even perfected the art of being humble, the most deceptive trait of all. But for Mossad, this was the golden hour. Every access point she opened, every whispered name, every scribbled note, it was all fed through her hidden channel. Encrypted, masked, fragmented, but always precise. They didn't ask how she got the information anymore. They simply said, "She's a genius." But even geniuses bleed. And Catherine was bleeding not from guilt, but from fatigue. The faces, the lies, the fear. She wasn't sleeping. Not really. She'd close her eyes and see the faces of men who had prayed beside her, not knowing she had mapped their homes. She'd wake up sweating, unsure if the knock at the door was real or final. And then, it happened. April 2017. She was preparing to fly back to France for a short trip. The excuse was personal, a sick family member. But the real reason? Delivery, flash drives, photos, notes, names, a mosaic of Iran's soul ready to be uploaded into enemy hands. But as she reached the airport, something felt wrong. A man from the Interior Ministry was waiting by the security gate, not in uniform, no badge, just calm eyes and a notebook. "Miss Shakdam," he said politely, a few routine questions before departure. Routine. The word stabbed her. She followed him into a small office. 3 chairs, 1 camera, no clock. "Why are you traveling?" "To visit family." "Are you writing anything controversial?" "No." "Have you been in contact with any Western governments?" "Absolutely not." His questions were smooth, not aggressive, not suspicious. But that's what made it worse. He smiled once, closed the notebook. "Safe travels, sister." Catherine walked out, her legs weak. She boarded the flight like a ghost. Back in France, she didn't rest. She delivered the information, coded it, cross-verified the coordinates with satellite images, labeled everything by region: Mashhad, Natanz, Tehran, Isfahan. And yet, She couldn't shake the man's face. Safe travels, sister? It was the sister that haunted her. He had used the religious term. He had looked into her eyes. And he had seen something. Maybe not enough to arrest her, but enough to mark her. And that's when Catherine made a decision. A decision spies rarely admit out loud. It's time to end this. But ending this wouldn't be easy. She was too visible, too celebrated, too deeply embedded. To disappear now would raise questions. To fumble would risk capture. To confess, unthinkable. So she decided to do what she did best, perform. By early 2022, Catherine was no longer just a name, she was a myth. Some called her a modern-day Zainab of the West. Some said she had been handpicked by the divine to help spread the message of Shia Islam. Others simply called her the French lioness of the revolution, but in Mossad files, she had only one title, SZ117, embedded prophet. They didn't see her as human anymore. They saw her as a signal tower. Every word she published, every room she entered, every smile she offered, it was all a signal. And Iran was listening. But no one realized what she'd truly done until it was too late. On July 31, 2024, a drone hummed high above the skyline of Tehran. Silent, precise, lethal. Inside a compound that was supposedly off-grid, 3 of Hamas' top leaders were holding a private strategy session. Among them, Ismail Haniyeh. They never heard the drone, never saw the flash, just a white light, 8 seconds, then nothing, smoke, silence, 3 bodies gone. Iran's intelligence screamed sabotage. They accused satellites. They blamed internal leaks. But no one had seen any breaches. No wires tapped. No spyware found. Only one thing was confirmed. The exact room was hit. Not the building, the room. And that accuracy could only mean one thing: it had been mapped. From the inside, the murmurs began again. One name, soft at first, then louder, Catherine. But she had already left Iran. She had disappeared 2 years earlier quietly. No farewell. Her articles stopped. Her social media faded. Only a short note published in the Times of Israel remained. I have seen the soul of Iran, and it is built on a lie. I embraced Islam not out of faith, but out of necessity. What I learned inside those walls, the world deserves to know. Iran trembled. TV channels erased her interviews. Newspapers pulled her columns. Photographs were deleted. Commanders she had married under Mut'ah dropped their heads in shame. Some were suspended. A few vanished. But before they could recover from that blow, another came. September 27, 2024. Beirut, Lebanon. A blast rocked the southern district, once a fortress for Hezbollah. Inside a shadowy command bunker, deep beneath a residential building, Hassan Nasrallah had been holding what was supposed to be an untraceable meeting. Only 3 people in the world knew the room's location, or so they thought. The drone didn't miss. Nasrallah was gone. So were 2 of his deputies. This time, the whisper became a scream. Catherine was the map, of course, skeptics argued. She left in 2022. How could she orchestrate hits in 2024? And that's when the theory emerged. The one that chilled the Iranian clerical council to the bone. She didn't just leave with data. She left with seeds, planted minds. September 27, 2024. Trained friends, commanders who still trusted her voice even in absence. Spouses who still had dreams of her. Ministers who had no idea that the thoughts she left them with were set to bloom at the right time. She wasn't just the infiltrator. She had programmed the system, and those programs were now running. By late 2024, the world began to witness a coordinated unraveling of Iran's secrets. Scientific sites were bombed. Research labs suddenly exploded from within. Key nuclear scientists were assassinated while eating lunch in secure zones. Each target was hit with surgical precision. And it wasn't just the hits that terrified Iran. It was the certainty. Every address, every time, every escape route anticipated. This wasn't technology. This was intimacy. Only someone who had been loved by the system could now kill it. The supreme leader said nothing publicly, but insiders say a private council met for hours in calm. Only one phrase was repeated again and again. She made us believe. In Mossad's headquarters, Catherine's file was updated. Status? Retired. Phase? Complete. Penetration level? Supreme. Casualties? 900 plus collateral? Unmeasurable. But for Catherine, now living under a new name in Europe, there was no celebration, no champagne, no missions, only silence. And one question: Did I destroy an empire? Or did I become one? Summer 2025. The air in Tel Aviv buzzed with quiet satisfaction. Another target had been eliminated. 30 Iranian security chiefs gone in under 90 minutes. No announcement, no claim, just death. Clean, undeniable. And in the corner office of an undisclosed Mossad facility, a man in a gray suit closed a folder labeled Z117. He didn't smile. He just stared at the final page. Target penetrated core ideology. Weapon used. Trust. Outcome. Psychological destabilization of Iranian command. Status. Ghost. Ghost. Because Catherine wasn't here anymore. Not in Iran. Not in Israel. Not in France. She existed in whispers. In old photos. In memories powerful men tried to erase. But erasing her was like trying to erase a scar. Every Iranian officer she touched now looked over their shoulder. Every cleric she praised wondered if his sermons were scripted by her suggestions. Every academic who quoted her now questioned whether they had ever believed in the first place or just followed her performance. She didn't just take information. She rewrote belief systems. She left behind fear, not of Israel, not of America, but of each other. What if the man beside me is her second echo? Catherine didn't kill with poison. She killed with doubt. And that was the ultimate intelligence weapon. Because bullets miss, but doubt, it lives forever. Iran launched its own counterattacks in late 2025. Cyber offensives, proxy strikes, an assassination attempt in Haifa. Their resilience was real, fiery, unapologetic. But even in their retaliation, Catherine's shadow lingered. Because every time a drone was spotted over Tehran, every time a scientist got into his car, every time a commander heard the click of a phone, they all wondered, did she leave something else behind? Maybe a keyword, maybe a contact, maybe another woman, another voice, another pen. And that's how she truly won, not by surviving, but by leaving behind a system infected with her memory. She never published another book. She gave no interviews. She didn't go on podcasts or leak her story. But once, just once, she wrote something on a private blog, hidden behind layers of firewalls and encryption. It wasn't a confession, not a memoir, just a sentence. I entered as a student. I left as a mirror. You never saw me, you only saw yourselves. And somewhere in the vast intelligence archives of Iran, a low-level analyst read that line and shivered. Because she was right. They hadn't seen her. They saw what they wanted to see. A convert, a follower, a believer. They saw a woman who cried at Karbala and forgot that actors cry too. They saw a journalist and forgot that pens can kill. They saw submission and forgot to ask who was writing the script. Catherine Perez Shakdam had become the most successful spy, not because she lied but because she told enough truth to be trusted. She wasn't a warrior. She was a reflection. And by the time they smashed the mirror, it was already too late. The cracks were everywhere. And now we ask you, the viewer, what's more dangerous, the enemy at the gate or the friend you prayed beside, who already walked in? Let us know in the comments below. Because maybe, just maybe, the next Catherine is already watching.